Okay, let's unpack the nightly theater that plays out behind our eyelids dream. It's wild to think about, isn't it?
It really is something every single human being experiences, yet the landscapes and stories are uniquely ours.
Exactly. Your brain cooks up these intricate, often bizarre narratives filled with sensations that feel utterly real right up until the moment you wake up.
Yeah, and for centuries, we've been trying to figure out what it all means. It's that universal yet deeply personal aspect that's so fascinating.
Right, we all do it, but the inner world of our dreams remains stubbornly private.
It's this strange cocktail of the familiar echoes of our day, perhaps, and the utterly surreal, those moments that feel like they're bubbling up from some hidden corner of our minds.
Totally. And you, listening to us right now, you'll be diving into your own dream world tonight, which, sparks a pretty fundamental question, doesn't it?
What's the story with all of this? What's it for?
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we're going to explore the science, the leading theories, and even how different cultures interpret these nightly journeys.
Our goal really is to move beyond the basic explanations and try to get a clearer understanding of the why and the how of our dreams.
Yeah, to shed some light on this truly enigmatic part of our consciousness.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with the engine room. What's actually happening in our brains when we're off in dream?
Well, we all kind of know dreams are strongest during REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. But under the hood, it's pretty busy.
Busy how?
Well, what's crucial to understand is that during REM sleep, your brain activity looks surprisingly similar to when you're awake.
Really? Like fully active?
In many ways, yes. There's increased blood flow, neurons are firing rapidly, and as the name suggests, your eyes are darting around. Crucially, though, a safety mechanism kicks in. Your body becomes temporarily paralyzed thanks to signals from the brainstem.
The sleep paralysis thing.
Exactly. Think of it as nature's way of preventing us from, sleepwalking our way through our dream adventures.
Mental movie night with the emergency brake on makes sense. So which parts of the brain are really running the show?
Several key areas become particularly active. The visual cortex is working overtime, which is why our dream imagery is so vivid.
Right, the pictures in our head.
And the amygdala, the brain's emotional center, especially for fear, also shows heightened activity.
Ah, okay. That might explain why so many dreams carry that strong emotional punch, particularly anxiety.
Precisely. It resonates with a lot of people's experience.
That totally resonates.
Yeah.
I know my more intense dreams are usually pretty emotionally charged. What about the logical part of our brain? Does that just clock out for the night?
That's a great way to put it, actually. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for logical reasoning and decision-making, actually shows decreased activity during dreaming.
Okay, so that's why weird stuff seems totally normal in dreams.
That might be a big part of it. It could be why we so readily accept the completely surreal logic of dreams until we wake up and think, wait, that didn't make any sense at all.
So no fact-checking in dreamland. Understood. And what about memory? I often wonder why some dreams stick with me and others just vanish the instant I open my eyes.
Yeah, that's a common question. The hippocampus and neocortex, key players in memory consolidation, are very active during sleep, including REM.
How does that connect to the dream content?
Well, the hippocampus seems to replay the day's events, kind of transferring short-term memories to long-term storage in the neocortex. And it appears this process prioritizes emotionally significant information.
So emotional stuff gets tagged as important for storage.
It seems that way. Which could explain why dream content often weaves in our emotional concerns or recent impactful experiences, things that matter to us emotionally.
Okay, so we've got the brain regions lighting up, the body on lockdown, but that central question remains, doesn't it? Is all this physiological activity for dreaming, or is dreaming just happening alongside it?
Exactly. Is it a primary function or more of a side effect, a purposeful biological function or just noise?
Right.
And that leads us really to the two main ways of thinking about why we dream.
Okay, what are they?
One sees dreams as having a fundamental purpose, maybe an evolutionary advantage. The other views them as more of a byproduct, a kind of neural static.
All right, let's dive into the first idea. Dreams as our ancient survival tools. What's the core concept here?
So the central idea of the functional perspective is that dreaming evolved because it gave our ancestors an edge, basically a survival advantage.
So dreaming helped us survive better.
That's the theory. Think of it as a biologically useful trait that made those who dreamed more effectively more likely to survive and, have offspring.
And what's a key example of this functional thinking?
The threat simulation theory is probably the most prominent example. The idea here is that dreams, especially those anxiety-ridden ones we often have,
Yeah, the stressful ones.
those act as a kind of virtual reality training ground. They allow us to rehearse how to respond to threatening situations without any real danger.
Like a mental practice session for scary scenario, a flight simulator for danger.
Exactly. Imagine early humans dreaming of encountering a predator and practicing escape routes or fight responses in their minds.
Okay, I can see how that might help.
That split-second advantage in a real-life encounter could have been the difference between survival and not. The emotional systems activated could prepare us to react more effectively.
So those nightmares might actually have a valuable purpose, paradoxically.
From this perspective, yes.
That's a pretty consoling thought.
Yeah.
Is there any evidence to back this up, like besides the logic of it?
Well, there are several supporting observations. Dreams frequently contain threatening elements and negative emotions, particularly anxiety. That fits the model.
Okay.
Interestingly, children who are naturally more vulnerable tend to have a higher proportion of threatening dreams than adults.
That makes sense.
And studies across different cultures suggest that people living in more dangerous environments report more threatening dream content.
That also lines up. So beyond just practicing for threats, are there other potential survival benefits to dreaming in this functional view?
Oh, absolutely. Some theories suggest dreams help us with problem solving in a safe, consequence-free mental space.
Like working things out overnight?
Kind of. Others propose they aid in emotional regulation by allowing us to process difficult feelings in a contained way. We'll probably touch on that more later.
Okay.
There are even ideas that dreams play a role in developing and maintaining social bonds by simulating social interactions and enhancing our emotional intelligence.
Wow. Okay. So the main idea here is that the act of dreaming itself provided some kind of adaptive benefit, leading to better survival or more offspring for the dreamers.
That's the core thread of the functional perspective, yes.
Okay, now let's look at the other side of the coin. What's the opposing view? Dreams as just byproduct, neural static.
Right, the epiphenomenon perspective. This argues that dreams themselves don't actually serve a specific function. Instead, they're seen as byproducts, kind of like side effects of other essential neural processes happening during sleep.
Like what kind of process?
Things like memory consolidation, which we talked about, or general brain maintenance, neural housekeeping, you could say.
So like a car engine running and the exhaust just happens to come out, the engine needs to run, the exhaust there.
That's a pretty good analogy, actually. The idea is that REM sleep and its associated neurological activity evolved for reasons unrelated to the content of dream. Dreaming, in this view, arises because our conscious mind, our forebrain, tries to make sense of essentially random neural firing happening elsewhere, particularly signals coming up from the brainstem during REM.
So the brain is just trying to weave a story out of random signals.
Pretty much. As the brain is busy consolidating memories, reorganizing connections, doing its nightly work, it generates this flurry of neural signals. Our waking consciousness, or what passes for it during sleep, detects this activity but lacks real-world sensory input. So it does its best to weave these signals into some kind of coherent narrative, the dream we experience.
So the weird, nonsensical nature of so many dreams isn't a flaw, it's actually a natural outcome of this random firing.
Precisely. They seem strange because they don't originate from logical, directed thought, but from the brain's best attempt to interpret what is essentially, well, neural static or random activations.
Is there a specific theory for that?
Yes. The activation synthesis hypothesis, originally developed by Hobson and McCarley, is a prime example. It suggests dreams result from the forebrain trying its best to synthesize or make sense of these relatively random signals originating in the brainstem during REMs.
And is there evidence supporting this neural static idea?
Yes. Proponents point to a few things. The fact that dreams often incorporate elements from our recent experiences, the day residue effect, suggests a link to ongoing memory processing, which is known to happen during sleep.
Okay.
Also, the often bizarre, illogical, and disjointed nature of dream content seems to fit well with the idea of the brain trying to create order out of random signals. It's not always a smooth narrative.
True, they can jump around a lot.
And the fact that we quickly forget so many of our dreams could suggest they aren't particularly important or functional in themselves. If they were vital, maybe we'd remember them better.
Okay. So we've got these two pretty different ways of looking at it, purposeful function versus byproduct. But it feels like, reality is probably more complex than just one or the other.
Absolutely. I think that's where a lot of contemporary dream researchers land. They're moving towards integrated models that acknowledge both the physiological underpinnings of dreams and their potential psychological functions. It's not necessarily in either situation.
So bridging the gap somehow.
Exactly. The neurocognitive theory of dreaming, for instance, proposes that dreams emerge from our normal cognitive processes, thinking, imagining, remembering, just operating under the unique neurochemical conditions of REMs.
So the way we think in dreams is still us, just in a different brain state, not some totally alien process.
Essentially, yes. In this view, dreaming isn't some separate, bizarre phenomenon, but rather reflects the same fundamental mechanisms that generate our waking thought, just shaped differently by the sleeping brain's environment. Less input, different chemical balance.
Okay, that makes sense. Any other integrated ideas?
Yeah, another influential one is the continuity hypothesis. This suggests that our dreams tend to reflect our waking concerns, our ongoing thoughts, emotions, and experiences. There's a continuity between our sleeping and waking lives.
So what you worry about during the day might show up maybe differently in your dreams.
Exactly. And in this view, rather than having one single function, dreams might contribute to multiple aspects of our well-being, helping process emotions, consolidate important memories, maybe even helping us navigate social complexities by simulating interactions.
It's almost like dreaming is a Swiss Army knife for the brain then. Lots of potential tools or uses depending on what's needed.
That's a great analogy. And perhaps most interestingly, dreams might serve different functions for different people, or even for the same person at different times.
Depending on their life circumstances or current worries.
Could be. The sheer variety of dream experiences, from the mundane replays of the day to the deeply emotional nightmares to those completely surreal, lucid adventures. It really hints that no single simple explanation might fully capture the complexity of dreams.
Speaking of those surreal adventures, let's talk about lucid dreaming, that thing where you become aware that you're dreaming while you're still in the dream. That sounds like it throws a bit of a curveball into the whole random neural static idea, right?
It certainly presents a fascinating challenge, yeah. Lucid dreaming, where the dreamer realizes they're dreaming and can often even exert some control over the dream narrative. It offers a unique window into dream consciousness.
How so? What does it tell us?
Well, neuroscientific studies have actually identified distinct brain activity patterns during lucid dreaming. Notably, there's increased activity in parts of the prefrontal cortex.
The logic center that's usually less active.
Exactly. The areas involved in higher-level cognitive functions like self-awareness, working memory, and volitional control, what we sometimes call metacognitive awareness, or thinking about your own thoughts.
Well, if your prefrontal cortex is more active, that suggests a more conscious, less random process is happening.
That's the implication. If dreams were purely random neural noise being passively interpreted, how could dreamers become aware of the dream state itself and then intentionally manipulate it, even just a little?
Right, it feels like there's some intention there.
The existence of lucid dreaming strongly suggests that at least some aspects of dream consciousness involve active cognitive processes, not just passive synthesis of random signals.
But you mentioned earlier it doesn't necessarily prove the purely functional theories either. Why not?
Well, that's right. The ability to become lucid might itself be a fascinating cognitive capacity that emerged, perhaps as a byproduct of our complex consciousness, rather than serving a specific, selected-for evolutionary purpose. We don't know for sure why we can do it.
Okay, so it complicates the simple byproduct view, but doesn't automatically confirm a specific function.
Exactly. However, what lucid dreaming unequivocally demonstrates is the remarkable flexibility of human consciousness. It shows that the boundaries between waking awareness and dream awareness are far more permeable, more fluid than we perhaps once thought.
It's like there's a whole spectrum of consciousness, and dreaming occupies a really interesting and sometimes shifting spot on it. Now let's switch gears a bit. We know the brain has two sides, right, left, and right hemispheres, generally with different specialties. How does that play into dreaming?
That's another really interesting angle, the brain's lateralization. Broadly speaking, the left hemisphere is often associated with analytical thought, logic, language, while the right hemisphere is more involved in holistic processing, intuition, visual spatial skills, and emotion.
The classic logical left, creative right distinction, though maybe oversimplified.
It's definitely oversimplified in popular culture, but there are functional differences. And during REM sleep, studies suggest there's often increased activity in the right or typically non-dominant hemisphere, particularly areas like the right temporal lobe, which is involved in visual spatial processing, recognizing patterns, music, and processing emotions.
So the more, let's say, artistic and emotional side of the brain seems to be taking the lead more in dreamland.
That seems to be the case. And this hemispheric bias during dreaming might help explain several characteristic features of dreams, why they're often so visually and spatially rich, why they can be so emotionally intense, and even their narrative structure, which is often less linear and logical and more metaphorical, associative, and symbolically charged, which feels more like right hemispheric thinking.
And what about the left hemisphere, the logical, language-focused side? Is it just offline?
Not completely offline, but there seems to be relatively reduced activity in parts of the left hemisphere during REM sleep, especially areas involved in executive control and logical analysis.
Okay, and what's the effect of that reduced activity?
Well, it might account for the typical absence of critical thinking or logical analysis within the dream. Without that strong analytical oversight from the left hemisphere, we readily accept talking animals, flying without wings, impossible physics, sudden shifts in setting or identity.
Without questioning it at the time.
Exactly. We just go with it until we wake up.
So dream logic is basically the right brain running the show while the left brain is kind of taking a nap, or at least not intervening much.
That's a simplified but maybe a useful way to think about it. And this hemispheric perspective might also offer insight into why dreams can sometimes feel so creative or lead to novel insights.
How so?
By temporarily freeing our thought processes from the more rigid logical constraints often associated with the left hemisphere, dreams might allow for new connections between ideas, more associative thinking, emotional processing unfiltered by rational censorship, and perhaps access to knowledge stored in different ways.
It's like our internal critic takes a break and our imagination gets to play more freely. Interesting. Now, zooming out a bit, we've talked a lot about the science inside our heads, but what about how different cultures view dreams? Is that pretty consistent across the globe, or does it vary a lot?
Oh, it varies enormously. While the fundamental neurobiology of dreaming, the REM sleep, the brain activity appears universal, the way people experience, interpret, value, and respond to their dreams is profoundly shaped by their cultural context.
So the biology is the same, but the meaning is different.
Largely, yes. Studies looking at different societies reveal both some surprising similarities in dream themes, but also really significant differences in how dreams are understood and what role they play in people's lives.
What kind of universal themes tend to pop up across cultures?
Yeah.
Stuff everyone dreams about.
Certain dream themes seem to be remarkably common, yeah? Things like being chased, falling, flying, maybe teeth falling out.
Oh yeah, the teeth one.
Right. Or feeling unprepared for an exam or performance. Being naked or inappropriately dressed in public. These shared motifs crop up again and again.
Why do you think that is?
It's debated. It might suggest that some aspects of dream content stem from core universal human experiences, vulnerability, social anxiety, navigating the physical world, or perhaps even built-in patterns or archetypes in our brains, as some have suggested.
But then the interpretations of those dreams or other dreams can be wildly different.
Absolutely. That's where culture really comes in. For instance, some studies find people in some cultures report predominantly outdoor dream settings, while others describe more indoor dreams. Some report more frequent dreams involving supernatural beings or elements. Even the typical emotional tone of dreams can show cultural variations.
And the meaning given to them.
That's where the differences are most dramatic. In many traditional societies, dreams are viewed not just as mental events, but as real encounters, perhaps with spirits, ancestors, or deity. They might be seen as sources of guidance, warnings, or healing power.
Okay, so very real interaction.
Yes. Then you have various Asian traditions where dreams might be considered potential sources of prophecy or indicators of good or bad fortune. And in the West, especially following figures like Freud and Jung, psychological traditions often interpret dreams as symbolic expressions of unconscious desires, unresolved conflicts, or universal archetypes.
So the way we make sense of our dreams is heavily influenced by the cultural framework we grow up in.
Precisely. Our cultural beliefs provide the lens through which we view and interpret these experiences. And interestingly, these frameworks can shape not just our understanding, but potentially even the experience of dreams itself.
How so?
Well, if you grow up in a culture where dreams are believed to carry important messages from ancestors, you might be more attuned to and more likely to remember dream content that could be interpreted in that way. Your expectations shape your attention.
Right. You notice what fits your worldview. It's fascinating how much our beliefs can shape even these very internal subjective experiences. Now, let's swing back to the individual level for a moment. We often hear stories about people having creative breakthroughs in their dreams, scientists, artists. Is there any real truth to that?
There are certainly numerous famous anecdotes, yes, stories of scientists, artists, and inventors who credit their dreams with providing the key insight for a major breakthrough.
Like who? Any famous examples?
Well, there's Elias Howe supposedly figuring out the design for the sewing machine needle from a dream about being chased by warriors with spears that had holes near the tip. Or Kekulé dreaming of a snake biting its own tail, which supposedly gave him the idea for the circular structure of the benzene ring.
Wow.
And even musicians like Paul McCartney famously claiming the melody for Yesterday came to him fully formed in a dream. The list goes on.
So it's not just a myth then. There might actually be something to this idea of dreams boosting creativity.
It seems plausible, and there are several potential mechanisms. During sleep, as we've said, the brain continues processing information, but under different neurochemical conditions.
Right, the brain state is different.
The reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex, that analytical part, might allow for more distant or unusual connections between ideas links that might be filtered out or dismissed by our more critical waking thought.
So less inhibition allows for weirder.
Could be. Also, the sleeping brain seems to prioritize consolidating important information and extracting patterns. This could highlight essential features of a complex problem in a new way. And the very nature of dreams, often highly visual, metaphorical, might allow us to represent abstract problems in more concrete form, which can sometimes reveal new insights or solutions.
That makes sense. Seeing the problem differently, maybe less literally. Is there any scientific evidence beyond these individual stories, though, like from experiments?
Yes, there is experimental evidence that supports these ideas to some extent. Studies have shown that sleep, particularly REM sleep, can enhance creative problem-solving.
How do they test?
Typically by giving people creative problems to solve, letting some sleep and others stay awake, and then testing them again. Participants who get REM sleep often perform better, especially on tasks that require thinking outside the box, finding non-obvious connections, or restructuring their understanding of the problem.
Interesting.
So it suggests that dreams, or the state of REM sleep in which they predominantly occur, may serve an integrative function, weaving together different pieces of knowledge and experience into new configurations, acting perhaps, as you said, like incubators for solutions that our focused waking minds might not.
It's like the brain keeps working on problems in the background, sometimes in surprising and productive ways. Now, dreams aren't always about solving puzzles or having creative flashes. They can be incredibly emotional, sometimes overwhelmingly so. What role do dreams play in our emotional lives?
That's a really crucial aspect. Dreams frequently contain strong, often very authentic feeling, emotion, fear, joy, sadness, anger. This emotional intensity strongly suggests that dreams play a role in our psychological process, particularly emotional process.
How would that work?
One leading idea is the emotional regulator. This proposes that dreams help us process difficult feelings, especially negative ones, in a relatively safe mental space. During REM sleep, emotional memories can be activated.
The stuff that upset us during the day.
Exactly, or even older emotional memory. But they get activated without the full-blown physiological stress response, the cortisol release, the high alert that we might experience when remembering those things while awake.
So it's like processing the emotion without the full body freakout.
That seems to be part of it. This allows the brain to gradually integrate these emotionally charged events, perhaps lessening their sting over time, without overwhelming the system.
So it's like a practice arena for our feelings.
Yeah.
Or maybe the processing chamber.
Both are good analogies. Studies have shown that REM sleep can indeed help reduce the emotional intensity of difficult memories over time. Dreams might facilitate this by repeatedly activating those memories within this unique neurochemical environment that allows for processing without necessarily causing fresh psychological harm.
Okay.
And the often bizarre metaphorical nature of dreams might also play a role here. It could allow us to process emotions at a symbolic level when confronting the raw memory directly would be too overwhelming or disturbing.
Like dealing with trauma indirectly.
Precise. This seems particularly relevant for traumatic experience. Nightmares, while incredibly distressing, might represent the brain's forceful, sometimes unsuccessful attempts to gradually integrate overwhelming events through this symbolic processing.
And those really vivid, emotionally charged dreams, the ones that stick with you, are we more likely to remember those for a reason?
Absolutely. Dreams with strong emotional content are significantly more likely to be recalled than emotionally neutral dreams. This selective remembering further suggests the importance of this emotional processing function. It's as if the brain flags these experiences. Pay attention, this needs processing.
Makes sense.
Some researchers even suggest that dreams act as a kind of emotional gymnasium. By simulating various emotional scenarios, they might help us exercise our capacity to experience, recognize, and respond to different feelings, potentially enhancing our emotional intelligence and resilience in waking life. Think about your own most vivid dreams. Can you identify some of that emotional intensity we're talking about?
It's like our brains are running simulations, not just for threats, but for all kinds of emotional situations. Now, on a slightly more mysterious note, what about prophetic dreams? We've all heard stories, maybe even had dreams that felt predictive. Is there any science behind that, or is it mostly just coincidence and wishful thinking?
Yeah, the idea of prophetic dreams is ancient and widespread. Throughout history, across virtually all cultures, people have reported dreams that seemingly predict future events. It's a persistent phenomenon.
But what does science say?
Well, modern scientific perspectives generally view truly precognitive dreams that literally see the future as highly unlikely. Apparent cases are usually explained in other ways.
Such as?
Coincidence is a big one. With billions of people dreaming multiple dreams every night, statistically, some dreams will inevitably resemble future events just by pure chance.
Right. The sheer volume makes some matches likely.
Exactly. Then there's selective memory. We tend to remember the dreams that seem to come true and forget the vast majority that didn't. And also, post hoc reinterpretation after an event happens, we might reinterpret a vague dream we had earlier to make it fit the event, even if the connection wasn't obvious before.
So it's more about probability and how our memory works than actual foresight.
That's the prevailing scientific view regarding genuine precognition, yes. However, that doesn't mean all seemingly predictive dreams are just random chance.
Ooh, what's the alternative?
Some seemingly predictive dreams might actually reflect unconscious knowledge rather than supernatural foresight.
Unconscious knowledge, how does that work?
Our brains are constantly processing vast amounts of information outside of our conscious awareness. We might pick up on subtle cues, patterns, changes in our environment, or even internal bodily signals without consciously registering them.
Like noticing tiny cracks in a wall without really knowing you noticed them.
Exactly. Or picking up on subtle shifts in someone's behavior that signal trouble brewing. Dreams could sometimes bring this unconsciously processed information into our awareness, often through metaphorical representation.
So a dream about a building collapsing might not be predicting an earthquake, but maybe reflecting your unconscious detection of actual structural issues you didn't consciously notice.
Precisely that kind of thing. Or a dream about a friend acting strangely might stem from unconsciously perceived tensions in the relationship.
So it's our own brain giving us a heads up, maybe, just in a dream disguise.
That's a really good way to put it. This unconscious processing might explain those intuitive hunches we sometimes get after sleeping on a problem or a situation. The sleeping brain seems particularly adept at integrating diffuse information and detecting subtle patterns that escape our focused waking analysis.
Okay.
When these insights surface in dreams, they can feel strangely prophetic because the knowledge seems to come out of nowhere. But they might actually represent sophisticated, hidden computations happening within our own minds.
That's a fascinating way to think about it. Not magic, but our own incredibly powerful brains working behind the scenes. Now, dreams aren't always pleasant, creative, or insightful. Let's talk about nightmares. What's going on when our dreams take a really dark turn?
Nightmares are defined as intensely frightening or distressing dreams that often cause us to wake up, and usually we remember the content vividly. They can be quite disturbing.
Yeah. How do they fit into the theories we discussed?
Well, from the threat simulation perspective we talked about earlier, nightmares could be seen as the system working overtime, perhaps, generating particularly intense, scary scenarios that prepare us for real dangers. But obviously they become problematic when they occur too frequently or intensely.
Like in anxiety disorders or PTSD?
Exactly. In those cases, it's like the threat simulation system is stuck in overdrive or isn't processing the threats effectively.
So nightmares in those situations are like the brain's alarm system going off way too often or getting stuck on.
That's a good analogy. Neurologically, nightmares seem to involve hyperactivation of the amygdala, that emotional fear center we mentioned, coupled with reduced activity in prefrontal regions that normally help regulate emotional responses and provide context.
So raw fear without the brakes.
That might be part of it, creating that overwhelming feeling of terror and helplessness often reported in nightmares. Interestingly, the content of nightmares often reflects evolutionary rather than contemporary threats.
What do you mean?
We're statistically more likely to dream of being chased, falling, being attacked by animals or monsters, rather than, say, dreaming about cybersecurity threats or stock market crashes, even if those are our waking anxieties.
So it taps into older fears.
It suggests that our evolved, perhaps more primal threat detection systems might still be strongly at play in generating nightmare content.
And what about those awful recurring nightmares where it feels like the same bad dream keeps coming back again and again?
Recurrent nightmares are particularly distressing. They may represent incomplete processing of specific emotional material or traumatic memory. It's like the dreaming mind is returning repeatedly to disturbing content it can't fully integrate or resolve.
Stuck on a loop, trying to work through something but failing.
That's how some therapists see it, and therapies like imagery rehearsal therapy or IRT seem to support this. In IRT, individuals consciously recall the nightmare while awake and actively reimagine it with different, less distressing or more empowering outcomes.
Changing the script, basically.
Exactly. And this has been shown to be quite effective in reducing the frequency and distress of recurrent nightmares. It suggests that by consciously helping to complete the processing that these dreams seem to be attempting, we can resolve the recurrence.
That's hopeful. And you mentioned this earlier, but the very existence of such intense, often threatening content in nightmares does challenge the purely epiphenomenal views of dreaming, right? The idea that it's all just random noise.
It certainly poses a challenge, yes. If dreams are just meaningless byproducts, why would they so often contain such specific, negatively charged, and seemingly relevant, even if symbolically, content related to threat and survival? It points towards a potential role for threat processing and emotional regulation, even when those processes might sometimes go awry and become distressing.
Right. It feels like something specific is being processed, even if unpleasant. Now let's think about the actual settings of our dreams for a minute. They can be so bizarre, impossible buildings, landscapes that shift in an instant. Where does all that strange architecture come from?
Dream settings are fascinating, aren't they? They often defy the laws of physics and logic, yet they're clearly built from elements of our waking experience or memory.
So familiar pieces, but put together weirdly.
Exact. Dreams seem to excel at recombining memory fragments in completely novel ways, blending disparate experiences, locations, times into entirely new scenarios. This recombination process is likely closely linked to memory consolidation.
How so?
Well, consolidating memories isn't just about storing them away. It's also about extracting general patterns, integrating new information with what the brain already knows, and making connections. Dreams might be a space where this happens very freely.
So it's like our memories are Lego bricks that our dreaming brain can just snap together however it wants, building crazy structures.
Precisely. That's a fantastic analogy. And the constructive, sometimes fluid and unstable nature of dream landscapes might actually mirror the reconstructive nature of memory itself.
What do you mean reconstructive?
When we remember something, we're not just retrieving a fixed recording like a video file. We're actively rebuilding the memory each time, based on fragments and association. This makes memory flexible, but also susceptible to distortion or modification. Dreams might represent this reconstructive process in its most unconstrained creative form.
Okay,
And think about the hippocampus, that brain region crucial for memory and spatial navigation. It's very active during. This might explain why spatial disorientation is so common in dreams. Sudden shifts in location, impossible geography, getting lost in familiar places.
So those strange dream houses and impossible journeys might actually be our brain exploring its own internal maps or testing spatial possibilities.
That's one interpretation, yes. It could reflect the hippocampus exploring navigational possibilities unconstrained by physical reality, or perhaps testing and strengthening our spatial memories, and perhaps most intriguingly, the strange, often emotionally charged architecture of our dreams might sometimes visually reveal underlying associative links between different memory clusters or emotional connections or conceptual relationships that our conscious minds don't readily recognize when we're...
That's a fascinating thought, our dream worlds as a kind of symbolic map of our own interconnections. Now, what about the people or characters in our dreams? They can be familiar faces, complete strangers, even ourselves in different form. What's the story with them? Who are they?
Dreams certainly populate our nights with a whole cast of characters, don't they? From a psychological perspective, particularly in traditions like Jungian analysis, dream figures are often seen as personifications of aspects of ourselves.
Like parts of our own personality.
Exactly. Our own traits, desires, fears, maybe unacknowledged aspects of our personality or conflicts we're grappling with, all taking human or non-human form. Logically, of course, these characters must originate from the dreamer's own brain activity we're generating.
But sometimes they feel so real, almost like they have their own thoughts and feelings, independent of us.
Yes. That's something experienced dreamers, especially lucid dreamers, often report that dream characters can display surprising autonomy.
How so?
They might say things the dreamer didn't consciously know, express viewpoints contrary to the dreamer's own, provide unexpected information, or act in genuinely surprising ways. It doesn't always feel like we are puppeteering them.
So how could that happen if we are generating them?
It's a puzzle. One idea is that this apparent independence might reflect the modular nature of consciousness. Different brain systems or aspects of our minds, which perhaps hold different information or perspectives, can temporarily manifest as seemingly separate entities or characters within the dream narrative.
So it's like different parts of ourselves are having a conversation or an argument in our dream.
That's one compelling way to think about it, yeah. It's even been reported, anecdotally and sometimes in studies, that dream characters occasionally provide creative insights or solutions to waking problems, potentially representing access to knowledge stored within brain systems not directly available to our normal waking consciousness.
Wow, like tapping into a hidden part of your own mind through a dream character.
Potentially. Another perspective, linking back to social aspects, is the social simulation hypothesis. This suggests that dream characters might represent the brain's internal models of how other people might think, feel, and behave. Dreaming could allow us to rehearse social interactions and anticipate potential outcomes in a safe space.
It's like we're constantly running social simulations in our sleep, practicing how to deal with people. Now let's touch on a really important area, the connection between dreams and our mental health. They seem deeply linked.
They absolutely are. The relationship between dreaming and mental health is profound and bidirectional. Altered dream patterns often accompany psychological distress, and certain dream characteristics can even correlate with specific mental health disorders.
Okay.
Conversely, our dreams themselves can influence our waking mood and mental state, sometimes exacerbating difficulties, but also potentially contributing to processing and healing.
How do things like depression or anxiety typically show up in our dreams, for example?
Well, depression often affects both dream content and how well people remember their dreams. Depressed individuals typically report remembering fewer dreams overall, but when they do recall them, the dreams often contain more negative emotional content, mirroring their waking mood state themes of loss, failure, or hopelessness.
Okay, so a reflection of the waking state. What about anxiety?
Anxiety disorders also tend to manifest quite clearly in dreams. People might experience more frequent threatening or anxiety-provoking dreams. Generalized anxiety might lead to exaggerated dream versions of everyday worry. Social anxiety can sometimes produce recurring dreams of embarrassment, judgment, or rejection.
And PTSD. We mentioned nightmares.
Yes. PTSD is strongly linked to traumatic nightmares, which are often, though not always, quite realistic replays or fragmented versions of the traumatic event. These are thought to represent the brain's struggle, often unsuccessful, to process and integrate the overwhelming emotional impact of the trauma.
So our dream life can be a kind of window into, or at least an indicator of, our overall mental well-being.
Absolutely, it can be. Changes in dream patterns or intensity can sometimes be an early sign that something is amiss psychologically. But importantly, dreams can also be a pathway to healing. Dream work exploring dream content and meaning has a long history in various forms of psychotherapy. And as we discussed, more contemporary therapeutic approaches like imagery rehearsal therapy for nightmares and even lucid dream therapy, where people learn to modify dream content while dreaming, have shown real effectiveness in reducing nightmare frequency and distress, particularly in PT.
So it works both ways, reflecting health and potentially improving it.
Exactly. This two-way relationship really highlights the important psychological functions. Dreams likely serve emotional processing, integration of experience, and potentially contributing to psychological healing and resilience.
It's amazing how our internal dream world can both reflect and impact our waking mental state so significantly. Now, on the flip side, what happens when we don't dream or dream less? Are there any known consequences if REM sleep is suppressed?
That's a really important question, especially given that certain conditions and substances can suppress REM sleep and presumably dreaming.
Like what?
Well, many common antidepressants, particularly the SSRIs, are known to substantially reduce the amount of REM sleep people get. Alcohol also disrupts normal sleep architecture and tends to suppress REM, especially later in the night after drinking. And certain neurological conditions or brain injuries affecting the brainstem can also selectively impair REM mechanism.
Okay, so what are the consequences of this dream suppression? Is it bad for us?
It's complex and honestly not fully understood yet. It presents something of a puzzle for dream science.
Why a puzzle?
You mentioned antidepressants reducing REM. Millions of people take these medications, often long-term, and while they have side effects, they generally don't seem to cause major cognitive meltdowns or severe emotional problems, specifically because of the REM reduction.
Right. So does that challenge the idea that dreams or REM sleep are absolutely essential for basic function?
Yeah.
It certainly presents a challenge to the strongest versions of functional theory yet. If REM dreaming was critically essential for, say, memory or emotional stability in a fundamental way, you might expect more obvious deficits when it's chronically reduced.
But are there any observed effects?
Well, we do see something called REM rebound. When people stop taking medications that suppress REM or recover from a period of sleep deprivation that included REM loss, they often experience a significant increase in REM sleep for a while, sometimes with more intense dreaming.
Like the brain is trying to catch up.
Exactly. That suggests the brain does prioritize recovering this state, indicating it likely is important for something. Animal studies involving prolonged REM deprivation have shown negative effects like increased irritability, anxiety, difficulty concentrating, and problems with learning certain tasks, though it's sometimes hard to disentangle the effects of REM loss from general sleep disruption stress in those studies.
Okay. What about in humans, besides the rebound?
Some human research suggests that REM sleep suppression can affect emotional processing. For example, it might impair the brain's ability to properly integrate the emotional component of newly learned material or memory, which lines up with the emotional regulation theories we discussed.
So maybe subtle effects on emotion.
Possibly. The fact that we don't typically see catastrophic effects from drug-induced dream reduction might indicate a few things. Maybe our brains have other compensatory mechanisms that can take over some of REM's functions if needed. Or maybe the system is overdetermined. REM helps, but isn't the only way the brain achieves. Or perhaps the deficits are more subtle and not easily detected in everyday life or standard tests. The jury is still somewhat out.
So maybe it's not a strictly essential function like breathing, but more like a system that optimizes certain important processes, and reducing it might make those processes less efficient.
That could be a good way to think about it, yeah. Important, beneficial, but perhaps not immediately critical in the way some other biological functions are. Now, dreams also seem to change throughout our lives, right? It's not like a toddler dreams the same way an elderly person does. What are some of the typical patterns we see at different...
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, dream content definitely evolves across the lifespan, seemingly reflecting our changing concerns, cognitive abilities, and life stages.
Like how? What are teenage dreams typically about?
Well, teenage dreams, unsurprisingly, often focus heavily on peers, social evaluation, identity formation. Common themes might include anxieties about social acceptance, competence, relationships, school pressures, and figuring out who they are.
Makes sense, reflecting adolescent preoccupation. What about adulthood?
Adult dreams tend to be the most complex and diverse, encompassing a wider range of themes: professional activities, work stress, family welfare, romantic relationships, financial concerns, unresolved conflicts from the past, pretty much the whole gamut of adult life.
Okay, and then later in life, older age.
In older age, research suggests dream frequency might decrease somewhat. The content can sometimes shift towards themes of life review, reflections on the past, sometimes appearances of figures from childhood or deceased loved ones. Often there's reported to be less anxiety in the dreams of older adults compared to younger adults.
So a shift towards integration and maybe less future-oriented anxiety.
That seems to be a trend. Overall, this developmental perspective suggests that dreaming adapts to our changing psychological needs across the lifespan. Perhaps it supports neural development and learning in infancy and childhood, identity formation in adolescence, ongoing emotional regulation and problem solving in adulthood, and maybe life integration and coming to terms with mortality in older age.
It's like our dreams are constantly reflecting and perhaps actively addressing the salient challenges and tasks of whatever stage of life we're in. We touched on lucid dreaming a couple of times, but let's delve just a bit more into the practice of it. Can we actually learn to become conscious in our dreams more often?
Yes, absolutely. Lucid dreaming, that fascinating state of being aware you're dreaming while you're dreaming, isn't just something that happens randomly to some people. It can indeed be cultivated and increased in frequency through practice.
How? Are there specific techniques?
There are several well-known techniques. One is reality testing. Throughout your waking day, you frequently ask yourself, am I dreaming right now? And perform a check, like trying to push your finger through your palm or looking at text to see if it stays stable. The goal is to make this checking habitual, so it carries over into your dreams.
Triggering the check while asleep.
Exactly. Another is mnemonic induction of lucid dreams, or MILD. This involves setting a strong intention as you fall asleep to remember that you're often by repeating a phrase like, next time I'm dreaming, I will remember I'm dreaming.
Okay, programming the intention.
Right. And there's also the wake back to bed WBTB method, where you wake yourself up intentionally for a short period, often after about 5-6 hours of sleep when REM periods are longer. Stay awake, focusing on lucid dreaming intention, and then go back to sleep, increasing the chances of entering REM sleep consciously.
And we know this is a real state, not just imagining it after waking up.
Oh yes, it's scientifically verified. Researchers in the late 70s and 80s cleverly devised experiments where lucid dreamers agreed beforehand to make specific eye movements, like looking left, right, as soon as they became lucid in a dream. Since eye muscles aren't paralyzed during REM, polysomnography could record these signals from sleeping participants, providing objective proof they were indeed conscious and volitionally signaling from within the REM dream state.
That's amazing. So what are the potential benefits or applications of being able to consciously navigate our dream world like?
The applications are quite intriguing and are an active area of research. Therapeutically, as we mentioned, lucid dreaming can be used to directly confront and transform nightmares. People can learn to recognize they're in a nightmare and consciously change the narrative, face the threat, or even wake themselves up from it. This has shown promise in reducing nightmare frequency and severity, particularly for those with PTSD or chronic idiopathic nightmares.
That sounds incredibly empowering. What else?
Creatively, lucid dreams offer potentially unique environments for artistic exploration, problem solving, rehearsing performances, or developing ideas without real-world constraint. Imagine architects exploring impossible buildings or musicians composing directly in the dreams.
Wow.
There's even speculation and some very preliminary evidence about the possibility of skill development through mental practice in lucid dreams, like practicing a tennis serve or playing a musical instrument, though much more research is needed there.
So practicing in your sleep.
Potentially. Ultimately, lucid dreaming really highlights the incredible spectrum of consciousness and shows that awareness isn't just an on-off. There are these hybrid states between the apparent unconsciousness of typical sleep and full wakefulness. It's like unlocking a hidden level or potential of our own minds.
It really is like unlocking a hidden potential of our mind. Now, thinking even more broadly, on a deeper level, what do dreams tell us about consciousness? What are some of the philosophical implications of this nightly world build?
That's where things get really profound. Dreams raise fundamental philosophical questions about the nature of consciousness, the definition of reality, the reliability of our perception, and even the stability of personal identity.
How so?
Well, first off, dreaming is essentially a natural, universal, altered state of consciousness. It's a form of hallucination, vivid sensory experiences without corresponding external stimuli that we all experience nightly and generally accept as normal. This alone challenges simplistic models of consciousness as being solely about awareness of an external reality.
Right, because dream reality feels real but isn't external.
Exactly. It forces us to ask, if the brain can generate such convincing, immersive realities internally, how certain can we be that our waking perceptions aren't similarly constructed, at least to some degree? It blurs the line.
That's a deep thought. What about identity?
The experience of sometimes being someone else in a dream or interacting with seemingly autonomous versions of ourselves or others can challenge our assumptions about a fixed, unified personal identity. It suggests our sense of self might be more fluid, more context-dependent, more constructed than we usually assume. And remember how we talked about the uncritical acceptance of bizarre scenarios in dreams, the lack of logical analysis? Philosophically, this points towards the potential primacy of perception and narrative coherence over rational analysis and shaping our moment-to-moment experience of reality. What feels real tends to be accepted as real, at least within the dream.
Until we wake up and apply logic.
Precisely. And then there's the phenomenon of false awakenings, dreaming that you've woken up, only to later actually wake up. This really throws a wrench in things. It suggests that our very sense of being awake is itself another mental state that the brain can convincingly simulate.
So dreams kind of pull the rug out from under our basic assumptions about what's real and who we are, in a way.
In a fundamental way, yes. Perhaps the most profound implication is simply the demonstration of the brain's remarkable capacity to generate complete, immersive, experiential worlds entirely independently of ongoing sensory input from the outside world. This suggests that consciousness might be fundamentally generative, fundamentally creative, actively constructing our reality rather than just passively reflecting an external one.
It's truly mind-bending to think that our brains are capable of creating these entire immersive worlds, these subjective realities, every single night. So bringing it all together now, after this really deep dive into the science, the theories, the cultural perspectives, the philosophy, how do we even begin to make sense of this incredibly multifaceted phenomenon? Where do we land?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think it seems increasingly likely that the diverse approaches we've explored aren't necessarily competing theories where only one can be right. Instead, they probably illuminate complementary aspects of a truly complex phenomenon.
So different pieces of the same puzzle.
Exactly. Dreams likely serve multiple functions simultaneously, operating at different levels of analysis, the neural level, the psychological level, maybe even the social level. These functions don't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive. For example, the neural processes of memory consolidation during REM might provide the raw material, the day residue, while the psychological processes shape that material into narratives that help regulate emotions or simulate threats or explore possibilities.
So function and byproduct aren't necessarily enemies.
They might not be. Ultimately, the tension between purely functional views and purely epiphenomenal views might be resolved by recognizing dreams as complex emergent phenomena. They arise from essential biological processes, like memory consolidation, neural maintenance, that likely evolved for various survival-related purposes. But the experience of dreaming itself has then taken on psychological functions of its own.
Okay, so the specific content of our dream, the really weird stuff, the flying purple elephants, might often be largely epiphenomenal, just the brain making sense of signals in its own way.
Possibly, yeah.
While the overall process or the experience of dreaming itself, especially during REM sleep, serves important psychological functions like emotional processing, memory integration, maybe even creativity.
That's a really compelling way to synthesize many of these ideas, I think. It acknowledges both the biological roots and the psychological significance without necessarily forcing a single, simple answer onto a phenomenon that is clearly anything but simple.
So the wild, often nonsensical stories might just be the surface level of the brain's way of running essential maintenance and emotional processing in this unique kind of mental sandbox overnight.
That's a great way to put it. A mental sandbox where lots of important work and maybe some creative play happens.
Well, this has been a truly fascinating journey into the enigmatic, sometimes bizarre, but always intriguing world of dream. We've gone from the nitty-gritty biological processes happening in our sleeping brain all the way to the profound philosophical questions they raise about the nature of consciousness itself.
What's really striking is how much we've learned, especially in recent decades with advances in neuroscience, and yet how much remains a deep mystery. Dreams continue to offer incredibly valuable insights into our brains, our minds, and the very fabric of our conscious experience. They are a frontier that's still very much being explored.
Absolutely. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, maybe you'll pay a little closer attention to that inner world. And here's a final thought to leave you with. Given your brain's incredible, demonstrable ability to create entire, immersive, experiential worlds from scratch each night, what does that truly tell you about the nature of your waking reality? And maybe, just maybe, about the untapped potential of your own mind? Sweet dreams.